Now, given the political difficulties in driving large trade, a large trade agenda in the United States, and the economic context, and the complication of having to manage a negotiating process that involves a larger and expanding number of players with cards in the game.
Right.
What's your kind of best case scenario for how we should proceed? What's how do we promote continued liberalization and greater efficiency in the global economic system in the context of all these challenges?
Yeah, I think this comes up most directly on issues of governance at the World Trade Organization, for example, because the Bretton Woods institutions, which my students let off more lightly than the WTO for some odd reason, because it was a WTO meeting in 1999 in November, December. That's where everything hit the fan, as you know. So the kids actually think on campus, and the NGOs think WTO must be the worst of the international institutions. Actually, from their perspective, it's actually WTO is the most is the most democratic,
right,
to the point where one country can hold up things if it wants to. And it's interesting that Russia's entry has been held up. And for those of you who know that or who don't know, by two countries, US, and guess which is the other one? Georgia. So Georgia was kind of asking for trouble from the Russians. To be hiding behind the American umbrella didn't make much sense for it. But that's what you can have. But on the other side of the coin, it doesn't really work out so that people hold up, small countries hold up everything and so on and so forth. Actually, because people tend to coalesce into groups, just the way it would happen like in a departmental vote at Columbia University. People form coalitions, and the thing is not as chaotic as it looks. Secondly, I think we also have bent, because in the old days, the U.S. had what was called the Quad. So U.S., European Union, Japan, and Canada. Canada must have floated the idea and got in on the act, probably. So that was a Quad. And now already it's changed. Now you have G4, because which became G6 in effect, right, and probably is even larger now. And now you've got G20 and G8. And I was just telling Robert before the meeting that you have to be G something to be important nowadays. And so I'm going to print stationery saying Jagdish Bhagwati G1. As my daughter often, he was in the Marine Corps, said, "Daddy, you're a great leader, but you have no followers." And in Marines, we have a different problem. We've got to lead our troops. But jokes apart, we now have to really already adapted in a major way. But we have to make sure that we don't again give the impression that we take only the big boys like Brazil and China on board. Because the little countries also feel very upset, and now they're moving in the direction of wanting the UN to intervene, which would be the kiss of death, in my opinion, for something like this. The UN has never managed to do it. And UN is too politicized, like the last meeting we had, where the foreign minister of Nicaragua, who's a priest, I think, an American priest, I think, even a Columbia graduate, I'm told, like the president. And they produced about the worst document, very populist and anti-capitalism and anti-everything, and so on. And the meeting had to be postponed by 3 weeks till it was rewritten and so on. And the next, he was the president of the General Assembly. And guess where the next president of the General Assembly is coming from? Libya. So I don't think it's calculated to to produce the kind of results we would like, after proper negotiations and so on. So I don't think, but if we don't actually have the smaller nations feel that, they have something on the overall design. But I don't agree with people who say everybody has to be in on everything, and this is where, how people like Bono and Geldof, they know how to sing, but I don't think they know anything about economics, unfortunately. And, I'm making a point about division of labor. Let them sing and let us spend the money, right, which they collect.
Before we
appropriate division of labor. But Geldof once wrote saying, when G4 were meeting, and it was just a matter of India and US and to some extent EU and Japan having to, these were the countries expected to make last-minute concessions. Right. So this was a meeting of people who were going to give. Africa was not going to give. Africa is just taking, right, in terms of concessions. And Africa already had managed to get a fair number of concessions on one-way entry concessions, right? Because we Americans had also gone along with the EU, and Japanese had made some noise in that direction. So they were getting something, but they were not, no one was asking them to do anything by way of making a concession. So it was natural that you would not expect these guys, Africans, to be invited to that specific meeting. It wasn't an overall WTO meeting or anything like that. And Geldof had a fierce letter in the Financial Times saying, this was terribly undemocratic and the Africans should be. And I said, good God. And this is why this Zambian woman, Moyo, who has come out with this book on dead aid, and she's even more against these celebrities saying they know something about the subject and trying to gum up the works on everything under sight. So I think the governance issue is something we have to really think through, but I think we've got to give the marginalized nations a little more say. Otherwise, they will gravitate towards the UN, thinking that's where they get more bang for their buck, or at the WTO directly, right?
Right.
But I think we as leaders, because we are still
right.
leaders. Maybe there are others who have come up, but U.S. is still the biggest Rottweiler on the block.
Yes.
And so it has to really be
right.
in a expansive mode. This is why I like the President Obama has that. He's not someone who's going to wield the axe.
right.
At least constitutionally he's incapable of doing that and just saying, you have to do this, you have to do that.